Greetings everyone, hope you are doing well and having fun under the hood of your Active Directory infrastructure. The purpose of this video is going to be about UPNs within Active Directory. I already know that there are thousands of videos and articles out there about configuring additional UPN suffix or other stuff related to UPNs, but I guess there are certain key points which needs to be covered in order to fully understand the principles behind UPNs, which I guess I'm trying to cover in this video. So bear with me during this video. So, you might ask yourself what was the main reason that convinced me to explain this topic and upload this video. Here's the thing. A couple of days ago, while I was browsing through the topics and questions in Directory Service Forum of TechNet, I noticed an ordinary subject. The subject was actually quite simple. Changing UPN, user principal name of Active Directory users. Although the subject was quite simple and ordinary, the question within the topic was interesting to me. Apparently, the user wanted to know if there's a way to find out who is using UPN for the login process, of user accounts in their Active Directory infrastructure. I mentioned the method for fetching out the results in that thread, but I'm going to explain this in a video because I believe videos can do the job very well instead of text files. But before going into the details of how to do this, let's cover some basic principles of UPNs in Active Directory. And also, if you're curious to find out the thread, try the shortened link on the screen. Okay, UPNs, here we come. Okay, first thing first, what is UPN? UPN is a combination of user plus domain. And also, it is kind of a string in an email format. Notice that I'm not saying that UPNs are emails. This is not necessarily true. UPNs are not necessarily emails, but they are always in email format. What do we mean by that? Let's consider that we have a domain called contoso.com, and in that domain we do have a user called Joe whatever, and the UPN for this Joe in that domain is going to be the combination of user plus domain and an email format. So as we can see, it's going to be joe@contoso.com. This is the UPN of this user account. Pretty straightforward and pretty easy. Some basic stuff of Active Directory. If you want to take a look at the UPN, this is really easy. Properties, go to the properties of the user account tab, and there you can see the user account and the domain name in front of it, which as we said, a combination of these two can lead us to the UPN of that user account. Really easy to understand. But what are these used for? UPNs can also be used for logons. As you might already know, there are two types of logons. There are not two types, there are two mechanisms that we can use in order to log on to a computer. The first thing is going to be domain /username, and the second one is UPN, as we're talking about right now. This is the first mechanism of logging on to the computer account. As you can see, we do not have a combination of user plus domain and an email format. This is just a user account and the password. This is the first mechanism. But the second mechanism is just as we talked about, is UPN, using UPN. As you can see, again, it is a combination of user plus domain in an email format, which is mahdi@contoso.com, and this can form logging on by using UPN address of our user account. So what do we gain by using UPNs in our environment? Another good point of UPN is that it is much simpler for actually user to understand. For users, it is much simpler to memorize. I'm not going to get involved with the details here, but as you know, we can add additional UPN suffixes for our forest in order to make logging of the users much simpler, because they will be able to memorize their UPNs much faster. So for example, this is the properties of the user account. As you can see, at contoso.com is a default UPN for this user account, and I just created another UPN suffixes which is called at mspp.net. As you can see, this is completely different one. This is not necessarily means that it should be similar to the default UPN of the UZ accounts. They can be completely different things. So it makes logging of the UZ accounts much simpler because they can memorize their UPNs much faster. So this is another benefit of using UPNs, but I'm going to get into details of why this can lead to simplicity for users. In order to understand why using UPNs can lead to simplicity for our environment, we should understand what is the difference between the two mechanisms of logging onto our workstation, to our servers. So as we already talked about, method 1 would be domain name / user account, and the method 2 will be using UPNs for logging to our workstation. Let's consider an example for method 1. We do have a domain name called contoso.com, and there is a user account and a computer account, which user account wants to log into that computer. So when the user wants to log into that computer, firstly he should actually present the authentication package to the domain controller. So how he finds the domain controller? It's really easy. In the background, since we are indicating that John is a part of a user account belong to Contoso domain, it is really easy to understand that the authentication package will be directly forwarded to the domain controller of the contoso.com because the user account resides there. So once the authentication package reaches the domain controller will actually runs the process, and actually if everything goes well and the passwords are okay, the user will be able to log in and there would be no issue. And now for method 2, which is using UPNs in order to log into computer account, let's consider a complex hierarchy of domains. And this is an example of domains. Maybe it is not necessarily true in the environment, but you should get the point. A computer account resides in Japan, subdomain, which is a subdomain of Asia, and Asia again is a subdomain of contoso.com. Once the user wants to log into that computer account which belongs to japan.asia.contoso.com, the user should represent actually a UPN address for the form of authentication that he wants to use in order to log into that computer. So if the user account resides in domain France, the UPN is going to be something like john@france.eu.contoso.com. If the user account resides in domain Japan, again the UPN will be john@japan.asia.contoso.com. As you can see, these two UPNs are really long and hard to understand and hard to memorize for users if he wishes to log in using UPNs. So what we can do in order to have these long UPNs, we will actually create an additional UPNs for our entire forest, as we already talked about in the previous slide. Let's consider that for our forest we will add an additional UPN which is called mspp.net, and from now on, since UPNs are unique in the forest, the user will actually try to log into that computer account using UPNs. So the UPN of this user will be john@mspp.net. But when he wants to log into that computer using UPN address, the domain controller actually, who has the information about John, should be found in order to let the John to log into the computer of the Japan. How does this happen? How do we know which domain actually and which domain controller should authenticate us? Because in a complex hierarchy like this, there will be many child domains, there might be many domain controllers. Which domain should we choose in order to send the authentication package to? So here's when global catalog comes in. Global catalogs are really useful in logging on user accounts to the computer. I'm not going to talk about universal group membership caching or things like that. I'm just trying to focus on UPNs. So from now on, because we don't know how and who actually we should have the user account sent to, in the background this authentication package will be sent to global catalog, and global catalog will search through its journal. since global catalog has a replica of all the user accounts, all the computer accounts, and actually every object in the forest, they will be able to understand where this user resides. So it will run a process in the background, and it will inform us that for example, the domain paris.france.eu.contoso.com is the appropriate server and the domain in order to authenticate John at mspp.net. So once this happens, the authentication package will be actually sent to that domain controller, because the user account is there, over there at paris.france.eu.contoso.com. And from now on, actually the authentication will be happen, and if everything goes well, the user will be able to log into that workstation. Okay, we talked about UPN, so back to the topic, changing UPN user principal name attribute. So what was the question? Who uses UPN in my domain? Well, let's find out. Okay, if I want to find out that which user account is connected to a computer via domain control, I can even use event viewer. But let me clear my event viewer one more time in order to make sure that there's nothing inside. I do have a client computer here. I'm trying to connect to it using method 1, which is domain/user account. So basically this is something like that, contoso/id, and the user account for that, the password for that user account, and I hit enter, and eventually I will be able to log into that computer. For now, when I go to event viewer and refresh my security log, we will see that there are many event viewers just for single logging to that computer. So let me see, what do we have here. As you can see, it has quite a lot of logs, but we are looking for logins, and this can be one of the events that represent the user login. As you can see in security ID, it says contoso/mahdi. But let's use another form of logging to see if there is any difference between logging to the event viewer. So this time I will use UPN. What was UPN? It was the at mspp.net, and I will again type the password one more time. I will clear my logs. Eventually I will hit enter. This time again the user will log in, and if I refresh, I will see again there are some logs in my event viewer. But hey, we logged in using UPN, and the UPN was Mahdi at mspp.net. So why again it says contoso/Mahdi, which is the method 1. The point is, in event viewer it never logs the UPN of the user account that are logging to the computer. So basically every time you refresh your security log, no matter whether you use UPNs or not, it will log domain/user. So we should find another method for that, and event viewer is not gonna help us, so we can clear that out again. In order to do that, I'm gonna utilize Microsoft Network Monitor. You will actually need a network monitor, not just Microsoft Network Monitor. Even you can use Wireshark for that, but I'm gonna use Microsoft Network Monitor because it's much simpler. Let me run it with administrative privilege, and I'm gonna have a new captcha for that. So again, let's log in, this time using method 1 instead of UPNs. I'm gonna use domain /. The user was contoso / and the user will be, and the password will be So I will start the captcha to see what it looks, and then I hit enter. That's all. Everything we need is here. So let me see what we got here. Let me make all the columns visible. Okay, as you can see, for single signing, again there are hundreds of events that happens in the background in order for a simple login. But we're not looking for TCP, we're not looking for DNS. What we are actually interested in, we're going to look for Kerberos v5, because this is the packets which we are looking for. So as you can see, it makes the result much simpler and much smaller. So Kerberos v5, these are all the actually logins, all the logins related events. Again, we will need, we can have actually another filter for description dot contains AS request, and I'm gonna apply that again. Yes, these are actually the events and records which we're looking for. As you can see, in this part, Kerberos AS request, it says that CNAME was Mahdi, a simple user. It means that the authentication mechanism was used was domain / user account. So let's clear that out and create another captcha and go for the UPNs this time. This time I'm gonna log off, and I will try the logging using UPN address of this user account, which was mahdi@mspp.net, and I will eventually hit start again and log in here. So again, that's enough. We're gonna stop that. Okay, we're going for the filters again. What was the filter? The filters were Kerberos v5, and the second thing was description contains AS request, and apply. This time, as we can see here in the description, we can see that the user account which was actually used during the logon was UPN mahdi@mspp.net. So this is what we're looking for. If you want to find out how many users in our environment are actually using UPNs in order to log into the workstation, you can actually run this capture, run this network monitor or Wireshark or whatever you want to use on all your domain controllers for a while and capture the results, and then you have to see the result to see if you find an @ sign, or even you can use, instead of using @ and description contains, you can basically say oh, there's no undo here, description dot contains @ sign, instead of going too far typing all those as request. When you apply, you see that this is the same result. So you can actually remove all these columns if you want to have a report. We don't need these all, and these two You can save them. This is really easy for that. Uh, you copy them to a notepad, and basically you will replace these unwanted strings with nothing. And again, oh, this is another comment I almost forgot to uh, make this exception. And again, I will replace these with nothing. You will have a report of all the user accounts that are using UPNs in order to log in to their workstations. But keep in mind that when I say logging to workstation, this is necessarily not always logging to workstations. It can be Citrix, it can be FTP, it can be Skype for Business, it can be Exchange, it can be many other things. But if whatever happens, the requests will be sent to domain controller. So once you run Network Monitor or any other tools like that on your domain controllers and captures the information for a while, you will be able to understand how many of your users are using UPNs in order to log into their tool, is better to say, to their workstation, Exchange, Skype for Business, or whatever they use. Okay, I guess that was everything I wanted to talk about in this video. I hope you find my actually video really informative. Uh, if you find any goofs, if you find many problems during my speech, don't go mad at me because I'm not a native English speaker, so sorry for that. I hope again you enjoyed this video. See you next time, and thanks for watching.